Uh-oh. An error occurred. On the Distilling 101 page. That's my main page. How the hell? What's going on there? All right, that fixed it. That's crazy. Gotta have it on that page. That's the main page I run it from. Anyway, welcome to Distilling 101, everybody. What's going on, Steve? You first in here. You beat Clint tonight. Hope everybody's having a good week and a good Memorial Day weekend. Hope everybody had a good time. We did a pretty good time here. It's Clint. What's going on, brother? Patty, on time. How about that, man? Good to see everybody. Yeah, man, it took forever for this thing to go live, and then it kicked up an error for Distilling 101, and I had to manually go live on that page. That's never happened before. What's going on, Callie? Good to see you, brother. I remember looking at that Q84 UK and quite euphoric. That's pretty creative, isn't it? Quite euphoric. That's all I could come up with. That's interesting how they assigned that to you. You slip it away, yes. Well, that's good. Patty is on time. What's going on, C-Shine? Good to see you. Yeah, man. 8 sharp. I don't know. There's been a few times that I've clicked that start live and it take a minute or so to actually get initiated and go. We'll give everybody time to trickle in here while Clint does magic tricks and I try to figure out how to make sure that's on 101. Yeah, we're good here. Okay, good deal. I believe. Wait a minute. There we go. Yeah, I can't believe that I got that error message. That's the first time it's happened. Always something new with Facebook and always throwing curveballs at you. Well, let me get these links shared and let everybody trickle in. I'll do my welcomes. All right. Let's see. Hopefully we'll get, I'm going to count them this time. Yeah, it's slow again this time, so it might take me a minute or 5. I like it when it just snaps right in there and goes. Trying to go down my list here, and that way I can keep it in order. Remember who I've sent to and who I haven't. I don't know. It's so easy to get confused just trying to go straight down the list because, strangely enough, it will change right in the middle of it. I think it's ordered by the most recent posts and stuff, and so my list on my share list changes order quite often. So I have to keep a sheet and just go down the sheet. So I think it's which group had the most recent post, which usually puts, a lot of these on top that I normally post to first. But I have to focus because I'm getting old and I'm getting forgetful. And it is easy for me to lose track. So it's hard for me to talk and chew gum at the same time, much less talk about something other than what I'm doing and share these links, or I'll forget bigger than hell where I'm at. So I saw quite a few interesting posts in some of the groups this week, and a lot of times I'll talk about some of those. One of them was talking about pH and how it's not really important, and some people thought it was important, and a lot of mixed opinions on it. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that first and my thoughts on it. It's obviously there's a lot of people that feel differently. Some of these groups are named similarly, so I have to focus. So bear with me. Shouldn't take but a few more minutes at most. Let's see some. There we go. Yeah, a little slow. Definitely slow. I keep saying I'm going to get up with them and try to work out something where I can just click on the link. Click boxes and just click it and be done with it. Because I don't think anybody complained about spam or anything. And if you do have a group out there and you don't want me posting to your group, just let me know. I won't hurt my feelings then. Some people don't like videos, but I don't know. All the groups with unrelated topics and spam posts, I'd say they probably appreciate it more than they don't like it. And hopefully it spawns some conversation amongst them. And for the groups that I don't post to at very first, it's just because when I made the list, you weren't near the top, and it's nothing to do with anything but that. Wait a minute, where the hell was I? Where did I just? Oh no. Let's see. I'm just gonna have to guess where the hell I was. I know I did that one. Yeah. I'm gonna have to check one of these groups anyway. Yeah, that's where I stopped, and it was a little later than last time, so I got to share one or two more than last time. That's where I need to pick up. All right, so let me welcome everyone that I haven't. What about getting old and forgetful? Man, it's getting bad. Hey, Candy, how are you? Doing great. How about yourself? Great Smoky Mountains. I voted. I love seeing all that. Yeah, what you hear in the background is my overalls, the metal pieces of my overalls. I had to wash them, and yeah, I was going to mention that at the beginning. So you got a little noisy dryer. It's not as bad as tennis shoes bumping around in there, but yeah, I thought that was a little distracting too. But thank you, baby. We shut the door. It might cut down on the noise a little bit. I can still hear it a little bit though. I try to put it in there with some sweatpants and stuff so it wouldn't make so much noise, but it's still a little bit noisy. Well, the thing about the pH, it's not just for yeast. It's you really need your pH adjusted before you even start the conversion, because having that slightly acidic conversion water helps in the conversion itself. It helps. We know that when we make simple syrup or inverted sugar, that we have the citric acid or lemon juice or tartaric acid, whatever you want to use, but there's an acid in there, and that helps with the temperatures in breaking that glycosidic bond between the glucose molecules, and helps break that bond as a catalyst. So having slightly acidic water, even when you do your conversions, will help in your conversions. It'll help break those bonds up. So it actually helps your amylase work in breaking some of those bonds, and it'll help your conversions be get a better conversion actually. So other than that, as far as bacteria wise, I agree, Clint. It's probably not as beneficial as like a must. Generally speaking, less bacterial problems because your grain mashes typically work off in 3 to 5 days if you have all your parameters, optimal. It comes into play a little bit more important when you do lower temperature, longer period must, like in your wines and stuff, and longer ferment. So that's when it really helps, the bacterial issues more significantly. But it does help, with your conversions too. So having it adjusted down, and then you don't have to worry about as much. You won't have to check it again when you throw the yeast in, because other than helping that conversion, it's not gonna mean a lot. Now, the thing about pH that I mentioned in response to the questions, it is like nutrients. Um, you can do a wine must or a grain. Well, not grains so much because those have a lot of nutrients in themselves, yan and fan, especially if you have malts. But just corn itself, kind of a little bit deficient, but grains for the most part, they got plenty of nutrients. But if you look at, like, just for example, a brandy mash or a must, not having the pH perfect or even checking your pH, you can still mash in and get a product. You can do that without nutrients as well. You can mash in without using any nutrients at all. You can do a sugar shine without any nutrients at all, and still get a product. Fermentation will still happen. This isn't like it's a changing event that's gonna. It's either yes or no. It's not gonna stop your fermentation from happening. What it will do though is help prevent bacterial buildups, help break the bonds, and it'll help your yeast overtake a lot of other um, bios that will try to compete with it. So it's not necessarily just bacteria. There's other things that try to compete um, with your yeast. So this will help the yeast overcome a lot because it's adapted and it's been acclimated to that slightly acidic environment where a lot of bacterias, molds, other things, really haven't and aren't. So it helps your yeast get a foothold, and it can help keep those at bay while it's doing its thing. So but you don't have to have it, right? So you can still get a product without using it. But as we know, when you stress yeast, sometimes you're going to get some off flavors. When you get higher bacterial loads, you're going to run into off flavors. And sometimes people shoot for off flavors, to try to get the specific notes that might be good, but sometimes it's a crapshoot. You're most likely going to get something that's not going to taste as good. So it just helps the quality. So keeping the yeast happy, keeping them stress free, generally speaking, is what you want to do, unless you're trying to stress them. And this is an advanced stage, when all your other parameters are right, and you want to stress them in a specific way to get a certain congener or note, to get certain esters, to get more head production, things like that. So, but generally speaking, for beginners especially, it's a good idea to try to keep all your parameters as close as you can, and try to keep your yeast as happy as you can, and you'll end up with a better product. Yeah, and right, and that's why we talk about using oyster shells. So, but starting out, um, maybe with a sugar wash, because there's no conversions or nothing happening. Maybe, something that is going to start creating a lot of organic acids pretty quickly. Maybe with a sugar wash, it's not as critical because you're not doing any kind of conversion. You're not breaking any bonds. You're basically using sucrose, which is a disaccharide. So yeah. And, one thing people don't realize it too is it's good to put both, calcium carbonate and citric acid in there at the same time. People are like, well, that just works against each other. It does, but it also creates a situation where it's more able to buffer. So if you bring it down with citric acid to maybe 4.3 and then add some calcium carbonate in there to bring it back up to 5.3, then you've got something in there that helps it actually buffer, which is interesting. A lot of people, it takes a pretty good understanding of the science involved to understand how that works and how the buffering works. And, it's a lot of people think, well, you're just they're working against each other. Whereas actually, it creates a low acid environment to begin with, and it enables you to add some calcium carbonate to that, water. So you will have that buffering ability, but you still have a pH that's at a lower level. So if you just take, for example, tap water at 7.0 and you add your calcium carbonate in there, it's going to shoot your pH a little bit, right? And it's just going to be high. You have your buffering capabilities in there, but you don't have that acidic environment. So adding the citric acid, bringing it down to 4 point whatever, and adding calcium carbonate in there to bring it back up a little bit, actually helps. So that's kind of contradictory. A lot of people, but it helps. It helps buffer, and it helps keep your acid at the right pace. What's going on, Jeff? Good to see you, brother. Awesome. So maybe Chris, you can tell everybody about what that ABAID is. It's a group of bikers that promotes biker safety. Pretty cool. What is my favorite type of shine? I don't know, man. I'd say my grappa was probably one of my best tasting shines that I've had in quite some time. I really enjoyed it. Really unique sweetness, really good. But I love my corn liquor too. So my favorite probably just corn liquor. And why? Because it's so simple, so easy, and yet so flavorful, and it's inexpensive. It's probably one of the most least expensive that you can do, and probably tastes about as good as any. But everybody's going to have different, preferences on what they like best. But I like a corn liquor on some wood. Probably just a simple, cracked corn or cornmeal with or basically a ground up corn, starting out with a good yellow dent too. And that way, but heirlooms are great, but you have such a high cost. I just love the simplicity, the low cost, and the high quality that a good yellow dent will make. Uh, Not necessarily maybe the best, but when you consider the cost and the simplicity and everything involved, I'd say it's probably one of my favorite because of that. It's very economical, and especially if you're going to do something and start a business, you need to kind of cut corners and keep your costs down, and create a good product at the same time. And I think that would probably be where I would start. Oh no, that door was open. I'm glad you mentioned it. That my laundry room is right next to me. My laundry stash storage room. It's a big ass laundry room, man. It's like 10 by 20. It's a good size room. So it's got laundry in there. It's got all my filing cabinets from my business and stuff in there. So it's kind of part of office. It's basically my home office that I'm in right now. Right. Yeah, and that's a good point too. The a lot of the your amylases and stuff require, they actually prefer, a lower pH than just a neutral pH. A lot of people think a neutral pH is perfect because it's neutral, and for like drinking and in the body and all that, it is maybe better to be slightly acidic, 6.8 ish, but most of your city water municipal places try to keep it fairly neutral. It doesn't it's not hard on iron pipes and some old cast pipes and some of these older homes and stuff. It's fairly neutral, so you don't have to worry about issues like that. But for what we do, having that slightly acidic is definitely beneficial. And I think some of the alpha and gluco, if you do some research on it, they definitely benefit from it. And it's because of them, the acidic helps perform. It's a catalyst. It helps speed up and improve the cleaving process of what the amylase does. Exactly, exactly, and it's a low cost way of doing it, right, Clinton? And you don't have to use citric acid. You can use back set. That's the beauty of it. You have your acidifier right there. Keep some of it jarred up. It's great to pour into. As long as it doesn't conflict. So maybe not put a grain back set into grappa, because that would definitely, kind of muddy the water a little bit with flavors and stuff. But yeah, if you've got a grain back set from the last, you got it jarred up, and you're creating your mash water, getting ready to start, whether you're doing a simple sour mash or a sour mash or not, to adjust your pH down before you add that calcium carbonate or your shells in there. I've got some calcium carbonate that I stir in, and I tell you, it's hard to stir in. And when you stir it, it just balls up, right? And it floats to the top, and it's just a little white ball, and you got to keep mashing it, mashing it, mashing it, breaking it up, because you have to force it into blending in with the water and becoming part of the solution, because it just resists it. So when you dump it in, it stays on top. If you stir it in with a spoon, it'll just stick to the spoon, and when you try to drill it in, with your blender, mixer, whatever, mud mixer and drill, it'll kind of, you'll see little white balls floating up, and that's that calcium carbonate, man. It really doesn't want to mingle with the water very well. So you just got to break those up manually with your fingers and rinse them, and eventually it will dissolve in and work in. But having that acid will definitely help work it in a little better. But creating that acidic environment and then buffering it is definitely the optimal way of mashing in, whether or not you're doing a sour mash or not. It's very handy to have, and it'll save you money from using. You won't have to use citric acid, tartaric acid, lemon juice, whatever. Kettle corn moonshine, man, it'd be good. But yeah, they make a popcorn shine. Right. And in a climate controlled environment, if you can keep all your parameters exactly the same, whether or not they're optimal, but as long as they're the same, you can get into a groove, right? And you start predicting what's going to happen. And sometimes you can, eliminate the need of a hydrometer. If you mash in, and you use the exact same temperature water, you exact same pH, the exact amount of sugar or whatever you got, an ingredient you've got. Of course, there's going to be some, variance and conversions or what have you. But as long as you can kind of follow the same exact routine, you can get to the point where, you don't really need to do some of these things because you already know where it's going to be. So you know where your tap water starts at 7. You add 1 tablespoon of citric acid, or a cup or 2 of back set, and you get this exact pH reading every time you do that. After a while, you don't need to break out the pH paper anymore because you pretty much predict what it's going to be. So once you fall into that, sometimes some of your testing equipment becomes a little less imperative because you've basically have experience and you've established a certain step by step. And as long as you can keep those parameters tight, then you can predict an outcome. If your parameters aren't tight and you have no idea, and you're starting at different temperatures and you're using different yeast and using different fruits of varying sweetness, then it's an unknown. And then you really having that scientific equipment and comes into play a lot better. But once you start following that same recipe and you keep your parameters pretty tight, then it becomes less and less imperative that you use them. Yeah, and that's what I was saying earlier. It helps your yeast, not just bacterial overloads, but it helps your yeast take a foothold, because a lot of times at the very beginning, there's little battles going on between bacteria and yeast, and it just enables them to win out because the bacteria are stressed from the acidic environment. They're kind of dying off while the yeast is thriving. So, they get like a lacto, once you get to a certain pH, I think it's below 4, lactose is just going to go away, where some of your yeast can still work. So sometimes when you get a lacto and you don't want it, you can either heat it up and get rid of it. A lot of people just skim it, and eventually by skimming it, you eliminate a lot of your lacto and allow the yeast to kind of take over. So having it early is not necessarily a good thing, because they compete. Your yeast will compete with your lacto for that sugar and actually alcohol. Yeah, the buffering. What happens is in certain washes, especially like sugar washes and a lot of your tequilas and a lot of anything that has a fairly high amount of sugar, your grain, you're not going to have as much issues with grain crash, because simply the time, 3 to 5 days with the parameters pretty tight, you're done. You're ready to run. A good mash and generally speaking, most mashes benefit from a longer mash period, whereas a grain mash is not as critical. So some of your musts and some of your brandies and wines and some of those things definitely benefit from a slower fermentation, whereas grain is not as critical. And they generally happen in most commercial outfits. Will 3 to 5 days, they're ready to go. 6-8% good, go run it. And it's also business. What's going on, Irish? Good to see you, brother. Hey, George, how's it going, man? Yeah, inverting sugars helps a lot, and it's reason it does is because you're taking a disaccharide and you're breaking that fructose glucose bond up, and you're creating monosaccharides. And yeast love monosaccharides. Hold on a minute. Hey, babe, I can hear you. I don't know who she's talking to. Probably some of her friends in game. Her mom or her sister. I don't know. They're getting ready to go on a cruise. Her and her daughter and her sister and her sister's daughter. They're getting ready to go on a little cruise. So they're all excited about that. But yeah, creating those monosaccharides, it not only makes the sugar sweeter. That's why a lot of pastry chefs and a lot of people, that are in the culinary industries love the inverted sugar. That's why bartenders like using it as well, because it makes the drink sweeter. And it makes the pastry sweeter, and whatever you're using sugar in, it just has a sweeter consistency on the palate. And breaking that bond up, creating that monosaccharide from a disaccharide, the yeast can consume them a lot easier, less stress, and consequently better flavor. And yeah, what happens is when you start fermentation, um, your fermentation, the acidity will drop. So starting out at 5.3, they say is optimal. But as fermentation happens, organic acids are created. And there's a whole host of organic acids, probably half a dozen different organic acids that are created. For example, a lot of people talked about sometimes that vomit smell. Well, that can be either a lactic acid or a butyric acid. Those are two organic acids that are part of the fermentation process, and sometimes they'll happen in increased numbers than usual. Certain things tend to have more, like a potato mash that I'm doing right now, generally has some, a little bit more butyric. And lactic acid can have a kind of an acrid smell as well sometimes. So, but there's lots of different organic acids that are created in the fermentation process. And as those are created, that pH is incrementally going to drop, drop, drop. So if we have the oyster shells in there, that will help, prevent them from dropping to a certain point where they're going to actually stress your yeast. So we expect this drop, and that's a natural process and something you can expect. And again, once you get into a rhythm, these things are going to happen, especially with like a sugar wash. Those are probably one of the worst for pH crashing that you can get. So it's expected. So putting those oyster shells in there is a must, pun intended, but it really helps a lot, and it helps prevent that yeast from getting stressed, and it will make your sugar, shine a little better flavored because of it, because you won't have that stressed yeast and less congeners and less off flavors as a result. Yep. And I think that fiery bite might have to do with some of the stress relief on that yeast. I think that yeast stress might actually cause some of that bite. What's going on, Scott? Good to see you, brother. There's old Sheen. He's been busy, man. I ain't seen him a little bit. No, pretty much the acidity and alcohol. Make sure that when you do use back set that you run it down and run a lot of your tails out. A lot of times people will stop at 80 proof or 80 percent or 80 proof, whatever, not 80%, 80 proof. And that's a pretty high alcohol content to be pouring in on a fermentation, right? So that might stress your yeast, and depending on how much you use, especially. So make sure you run them down, make sure you get lower in your tails if you're going to be continuously using this back set. And if you do run it down, save some of it. Save that back set. What you don't use for your sour mashing or for other things, you can put in a gallon jar or something. It'll keep it in the refrigerator. And anytime you need an acid, just come out and pour it and use it and refill it when you get done, right? When you finish, you can replenish it. What's going on, Mr. Parker? Good to see you, brother. Limestone river water, be basic. It's hard, but often it just depends. You're going to get such a mixed bag, but necessarily just because it's limestone doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have a high pH. Sometimes it's just contributes to the hardness of it. But yeah, having calcium, and then this is why I was talking about earlier, adding citric acid to a certain level and adding the calcium carbonate or adding the oyster shells. But I like to use that calcium carbonate and force it to mingle with the water. Having calcium is essential in the fermentation process. There's calcium uptake that helps the actual fermentation process come along, right? So it benefits it tremendously. There's certain things that are required for it, and that's one of the reasons that they located a lot of distilleries in Kentucky was because it had a good limestone without iron. You know, a lot of times having a good, limestone also gets associated with sometimes high iron content. But here it had a good limestone content without the iron, which is optimal, and you can adjust it, right, and adjust the pH. So having calcium is a must. You have to have it for the chemical processes to take place to go from one compound to the other, right? So yeah, having calcium and calcium ions in there is essential, and that's why it's that type of water is definitely preferred. But when you take that kind of water, you all you need to do pretty much then is just add the acid, bring it down to 5.3 because you already have that buffering capability built into your water. Whereas if you've got a neutral water without any limestone and using something like a distilled water or a spring water, I say that with quote marks because a lot of times when you buy spring water from the store, you're getting a filtered tap water. So it's not a lot of that came maybe from a spring before it got, chemical treated and then, filtered through RO or some kind of filtration system, probably mechanical mostly. Um, so yeah, it's so when you do start with that, that lime water that has all the calcium in there that you need, then lowering that, acidity level without adding the calcium carbonate, yeah, you don't saves you from having to add that, and that's one of the reasons it works really well in the mash process is because it's an essential thing in the process. There's other essential things too. Zinc is essential. There's a lot of different minerals and elements that are essential. You're right, and that's why, because you have that lime in there, so it's pre-buffered for you. All you have to do is bring the acidity level down, and you don't really, right? It's like you got the built-in oyster shells or calcium carbonate added. Um, Hold on, I'll show you what I'm talking about. That must be upstairs. I've got it upstairs where I can just use it. I thought I had it down there. Also, adding a little bit of gypsum helps too. Right, exactly. And that's very typical, and that's why they really kind of acclimate the yeast to deal with these acidic environments. Like it's one of the reasons using wild yeast isn't always the greatest of ideas because it's not acclimated for high alcohol and it's not acclimated for low pH. So what you do, you take this wild yeast and you introduce it and you use it time and time again and slowly acclimate it to more acidic environments. So you'll start the first one, first ferment pretty much neutral. And then the next time you'll lower it down to 6.5. And then the next time maybe a 6.3 or 2. And then maybe the next time a 5.8 and just slowly acclimate it to where it can withstand, you know, basically selective breeding. So the yeast that can survive in these lower environments do, and the ones that can't die, they become a nutrient. So you acclimate it, and each time you get stronger and stronger yeast that can survive these acidic environments until you get some that can tolerate it down to the threes, which is really where you need your yeast to be able to handle it too, because it's very typical for your pH to start at 5.2 and slowly work down to, you know, the low fours and high threes, which hopefully your calcium carbonate and your oyster shells, once it gets that low, will start buffering. The acid will start eating away at the shells and it helps buffer it and neutralize it. It's not going to bring it back up to 7, but it helps keep it from pushing way down to the point where your yeast gets stressed. What's going on, Frank? Good to see you, brother. Papaya corn. I would say pretty much every combination's been tried, but different ratios. Probably not, right? So, you know, there's a lot of split brandies they call it, or mountain brandies that have a, you know, a grain and a fruit, and that sounds like a pretty good combination to me. So make it yours. Right. Limestone water is not just all about just the calcium carbonate content. It's also there's lots of good minerals and without iron. So there's a lot of essential things that are needed for a good proper fermentation. Like I was speaking earlier, zinc. You know, and that's where I learned a little bit more about this when people were talking about using the tomato paste for a nutrient. And I was like, well, I don't know. Is that really going to be a good nutrient? I started reading about this bird watcher's recipe a few years back. And I was like, I don't know about that, you know. So I started researching it, and it's like there's not much yan and fan in tomatoes. So I instantly took the hardline stance. Nope, tomatoes aren't good because they don't have yan and fan. But I was wrong. I was wrong about that. I was right about they don't have yan and fan. So they're not giving you the yeast assimilable nitrogen or free amino nitrogen that you need at all. But what I was wrong about is there are tons of minerals and other things in there that actually do benefit. So it does perform the function of a nutrient. It's just not giving the nitrogen that you need. So if you're going to use that as a nutrient, you still need to add something that's going to give you some nitrogenous content. So maybe bran flakes, probably one of the easiest things, or dead yeast, another wonderful, probably one of the best nutrients that will provide that nitrogen. Or DAP, diammonium phosphate. We've talked about that and how some people hate the fact of urea being in it, and they think that's like urine, but urea is just a product of the liver, and it just happens to flush out of your body in the urine. Whereas, water flushes through urine too. So you're not going to quit drinking water just because it's some pee, right? But a lot of people, man, they're like, oh, that urea comes from pee. No, it comes from the liver. It just can be found in urine, right? But so can water. We're not going to give that up, right? Yeah, it does sound good. I bet it'd be pretty flavorful. That run it? Find out. Let us know. Yeah, man, we've talked about this so much, and well, I mean, there's just the reason we both agree on so much is because there are certain things that are known. Maybe some of it may be opinion, but the fact is most of it is scientific, chemical, you know, type. It's a fact. So yeah, yeah. So, and that's why we both talk about a lot of the same things, and it'll sound like we're you know, reading each other's minds, or he's reading what I'm saying, or I'm reading what he's saying, or he's listening, But there's a lot of facts to it, and it's could still be considered an opinion because there might be that 1 or 2% out of 100 that'll say, nope, I disagree, and this is why I think it's better to do it this way. But I don't know. It's hard to tell somebody they're wrong when you still arrive at a product. It's just maybe not quite as good. And that kind of gets back to pH and whether you should use nutrients or not, and how to use nutrients. They're finding out now, like Clint was talking about a minute ago. Stepping the pH and nutrients, stepping nutrients. So not throwing them all. I'm starting to practice that now. Used to I dumped them all at the very beginning, but now that I've read a lot of research and scientific research that have proving that step feeding is much better. That way you don't get that initial rush and then that crash, which kind of stresses the yeast. So you start out slowly feeding it, and as the yeast consume and and it's a scale down. So you feed the yeast and step feed them, and they don't crash, vigor, work hard, and then die, right? So they kind of maybe prolong things a little bit, but definitely, less stress. Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Sugar alone is actually kind of difficult. It is a good beginners because of the expense and the simplicity of just mixing sugar and water and yeast and adding some nutrients and eggs or some crushed oyster shells. But they're very temperamental, and they definitely crash if you don't follow the steps. They're going to stress yeast if you don't add the nutrients and create some kind of buffer. You're definitely going to get some yeast stress. Um, but that's a perfect example. You can do two sugar washes. Try it sometime. Do one, and make sure when you do it, make sure that you use the proper amount of nutrients. I think one of the biggest problems people have with using nutrients is they use too much. They think, oh, a little bit's good, a whole lot's better. And it's the same thing with plants. Giving the plants the proper nutrients is great. You give them too much, what happens? It burns them out, right? They just dry up and burn out because you're giving them too much nitrogen. And the same thing happens to your yeast. You give them too much, it's going to kill them, right? So you have to make sure that you give them the proper nutrition and at the proper dose, or else it's too much of a good thing's not always great. So you definitely need to make sure that you properly dose your nutrients. But yeah, you can do a side by side trial and take, just sugar, just water, and just yeast. And then do another one with sugar, same water, same exact ratios and temperatures. But with this one, add a little bit of nutrients and add those, calcium carbonate or your crushed oyster shells, and kind of compare how both of them, and take pH tests and watch how they both react. And you'll see that it's and how they both taste. Distill them separately, and you'll find that the sugar wash with a little bit of nutrients and a little bit of buffering will tend to give you a better product than just that stress filled um, batch of hell that you just created. What's going on, Mikey? Good to see you. Hello, Miss Lisa. Good to see you as well. Hope y'all had a great Memorial Day weekend. Yeah, grain. The only tough part about grain, right, is getting the conversion and getting good conversions, and that's basically always a temperature thing. It's just hard to hold that high temp. So once you get better at holding that high temp and adding the water, like I talk about, and maintaining that high temperature and getting a good conversion, I got a real good conversion on my potatoes. Actually about as high as you can expect. So I was really pleased with that. Um, and used a little bit more of my powder and amylase, so I was happy with that as well. But trying to get rid of all that I can. But yeah, using the proper temperatures is essential in conversion, and starting out with that slightly acidic water will definitely help with your conversions. It definitely helps break those bonds up a little quicker. You out here, O'Sheen? Damn, bro, you must be busy. Well, message me. Let me know what you got going on, brother. I've not used Epsom. I've heard a lot of people talk about the Epsom salts. I've not used it. I have heard a lot of people use the multivitamins, but make sure that when you do, don't get one with iron. You don't want the iron. Try to find one that doesn't have fortification with iron. And also, when you if you're going to use meal from a store, never get anything that's fortified, right? It's fortified. A lot of times they're adding minerals, but a lot of times iron is one of those main ingredients that come with the fortification. So if you're going to use, I guess commercial type meals and stuff, don't get something that's been fortified. Make sure it doesn't have iron added. Right, right. And especially if you're using, I know a lot of people that like using the wild yeast and finishing up with commercial yeast. Those wild yeast tend to, they're like a shooting star, man. They'll be bright and great, but they'll burn out really quickly and they won't finish, and then you have to kind of finish with something that has a little higher tolerances. And that's also a pretty good way to help build tolerances for yeast if you're going to. Right. And lacto, that's something that you can add towards the middle or end of your fermentation. And it works well. A lot of people will use it. If you see me scratching and itching a lot, I've got eczema. And sometimes, man, dry skin, it gets pretty damn itchy. But yeah, um, definitely. Lacto definitely helps, but you want it at the end. Some people like the softness and the creaminess that it adds, and and it really helps. If you're creating like a peach cobbler or something like that, and you want to get something to subst that and oats both, we help get that creamy, almost dough like, so you get that peach and then you get that lactose softness and it almost gives you the cobbler effect where you can get that actual crust taste along with it. There it is. Yep, that's a fact, brother. You see, you've been listening, ain't you? What's going on, Brian? Good to see you, brother. I know things are out there and beautiful in San Diego, man. I had a great uncle that lived out there, man. Lived and died out there. He loved it. He moved there for the weather. Well, he's also ex-military, so I think he was stationed there and met a lot of people there and ended up staying there. Had a lot of naval people in my family. They were in the Navy a lot. Had a great uncle that was a vice admiral, highly decorated. He had his own fleet in World War II. He was very highly decorated. He was near the top, just under admiral. Marshall Raymond Greer, if y'all want to look him up. But he was highly decorated. Career Navy. How's it going, Scott? Yeah, man. It's good. I love the creaminess that it adds. No, actually, I'll say I was skeptical. That's the good word. I was always skeptical about elements. I just couldn't imagine that element being in there at that temperature, not causing some kind of scorching or issues or anything like that. So I was a huge skeptic. But over time, I've learned that I was wrong, and I'll definitely admit it anytime that I'm wrong, and I was wrong about that for sure because I've tasted so many different shines that have been made run with elements that I just bought one and I'm getting ready to make a box and I got to go up and see Wes and we're going to put together me and him Phil going to put together a box and um, I'm seeing a lot, because it definitely doesn't, and it's going to be a lot easier and cheaper than using propane. So outside next to my HVAC, I'm going to wire in a little plug in the side of that box, and maybe coming off that box, maybe make a little sub box off of it, and I'll just turn off my AC anytime I want to run out back there and run a little line over to it, or make a little conversion to run it off my clothes dryer or my stove if I want to do it in the kitchen. Just get a little converter adapter. They make things plug into one. It'll cross. I've got a couple. I had to get one from a welder. So, but yeah, they work real well, and it's a lot cheaper than propane. And it's as long as the PIDs don't heat as evenly as the SCRs. So try to make sure that you use an SCR, and that will definitely work out better for you. SCR, silicon controlled rectifier. I couldn't remember, but little different than an SSR, which is a solid state relay, which I think I'm going to have to use with mine because I think it'd be really very expensive to try to find an SCR for my 9,000 watt element. So I think I'm going to have to go with an SSR, but both are better than the PID. And a PID is proportional integral derivative controller. And basically, it's shutting on and off all the time, and it does a lot of that to help maintain temperature. Whereas with an SCR, you just dial it up and down, and it's more of a constant temperature. And that's really what you want. So definitely go with an SCR. Well, you still run the risk. It's like doing it on the stove. Just because it's electric cooktop doesn't mean you're going to go out and smoke a cigarette while you're running, right? So, um, I always be very careful. I run inside during the winter time, and not a whole lot, but be very careful if you're going to run inside. Accidents can happen. Um, Especially when you're dealing with cheap equipment and China steels and little silicone gaskets that can fail, clamps that can you think are clamped aren't, right. Had a buddy Phil of mine, he had nothing wrong with the Viver until that little clamp, you got two little legs that go in to this clamp that clamps down, and it's a wire clamp up here, which works fine until one of those legs come out and you don't notice it. And then all of a sudden, three sides of your steel are clamped down, the other side it, and then it's kind of tilting it and creating a little gap. And you walk out of the room and you come back in, and it's boiled over, and everything that's spilling down the side of your steel is now igniting and catching the ceiling on fire, and you have to grab a fire extinguisher to save your garage and house. So accidents can happen. That's why you really never walk away from your steel. Always stay there, maintain, and try to stay sober where you can, control. And if issues happen, and always keep a fire extinguisher handy, especially if you're indoors for sure. Right, like mine, I've got two different stoves that I've used. Both of them are Frigidaire. One's more modern and stainless, and it cuts on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off, on high. So it's more of a PID control. My old one, old white one, stays on. So it's more SCR type control. So make sure that if you're going to use that stove, make sure that it's one that stays glowing red and not one that shuts on and off. Even the same brand, they look a lot alike, but one's like 20 years old and the other one's like 8. And the newer one cycles on and off. And I guess that's fine if you're just cooking, to maintain that temperature. But for distilling, when you have that heat going up and down, you're getting different things coming off at different temperatures, and it's really affecting your cuts and the way that way things are distilling. It's a nightmare. It's not something that you want. Right. Well, I wouldn't distill on the grain with an element. Let's just put it that way. But it is great for, you know distilling. Just try not to get a lot of milky and a lot of particulates in there. Yeah, yeah, they're not real expensive to make. I do, if you don't understand the electric and not, I would highly recommend spending a couple $100. Let somebody else do it. Because that's 220 to 40 volt, and that's kill you kind of voltage and amperage. So definitely, if you are good at that, then it's something that you may want to tackle. But don't fool yourself and think, I can learn anything. I can do it. I can just watch a YouTube video. I can make it, because that's kill you kind of voltage, right? So you got to be real careful. You'll try this Canada Dry Zero Cherry Fruit Splash. Pretty good. I think it'd be good with a little vodka. A little shot. Damn it! Keep hitting that microphone, man. Yeah, I've seen them. Yeah, I got a 110. I got a pair of 110 fans for mine too, Jeff. That way I didn't have to try to wire it into something to get the 12 volts and try to come off some kind of resistor. I could just come straight off the wire that comes in, or one of them, got 110 on both legs. Absolutely. I did the same thing, brother. Never walk away. That's right. Absolutely, Richard. Yeah, I've seen. Let's see if I don't know if I have those pictures or not. I've got some pictures of an element that was just coated with I guess it was just whatever it scorched had stuck to it, and it was just chipping off, and it was thick. It was like that thick on there, and it was just crumbling off and cracking and breaking where it stuck to that element. And when we say clear, it doesn't have to be clear like 7 Up or water, but you don't want it to have a lot of solids mixed in it either. So it can be kind of milky looking, but be wary of the solids and make sure that it's settled out well when you do it. Now, if you have certain type steels have agitators, because it does kind of, if you can do it when it's kind of milky with some of those solids in there, as long as you can do it without it, scorching, it is beneficial because it gives you more flavor. It's kind of closer to distilling on the grain. So, like some of these commercial guys will have agitators, right? That have, little built in propellers that are stirring and keeping everything off that bottom so nothing sticks, right? And I think Wayne's got some technology that he's come up with that helps keep things from sticking. And I'm trying to make him do magnetic drive on a sub pot, that helps keep the circulation going across it, and that way you can kind of distill with a little bit more solids in there, because it is kind of like distilling on the grain. But unless you got something in there stirring constantly and keeping it from settling out before it boils and moves, I think Amanda talks about using marbles and stuff to help coat the bottom, and that way things can't settle down on the bottom. They'll just kind of settle down on the top of the marbles and stuff. And those marbles, once it boils, they kind of move around and help keep things stirred up. So another great idea. But yeah, if you got a little bit of solids in there, man, it's that element's going to definitely uh, you're definitely going to know it. What's going on, Kenny? Good to see you, brother. We're just chilling out, man, talking about a little making shine. What are you up to, buddy? Yeah, Jason makes great stuff too. Absolutely. So yeah, if you're not good at wiring and electrical, um, hit up Phil, Billy, or Jason. Both make great products. They will definitely do you right. Right now, your Vever will come with a false bottom, and you can suspend a bag in there, and definitely works. It definitely works. That's another good thing about those football steels. Basically, about 4 inches up on the Vever, you'll see a little indentation all the way around, and it comes with, like, basically looks like a pizza pan with holes, right? And you drop that in there. Now, I would recommend, if you got a very heavy grain bag, maybe put a coffee cup that's about the same height in there, ceramic or something that'll give it some support in the middle. Um, but yeah, you can set your grain bag in there, or you can hang it in there, and that'll keep it, off the bottom. I would recommend, definitely, before you do that, sparge your grain and get all your fines out. And then just keep kind of the chunky stuff that's not going to wash out of the bag and settle. Then you might have some issues with that. But sparge it pretty well and just use the larger stuff, and you'll definitely pull some better flavors for sure. What's going on, Dexter? Good to see you, brother. Hopefully you had a good Memorial Day weekend. Yeah, both of them make good stuff. Cleaning up a small run, making some, that's a good point. It's good to have a couple of different size steels. So sometimes, always everybody, oh, I have 30, 40, 50 gallons. Sometimes when you need to run it a second time, having something, half the size comes in very handy, because you don't, you know, when you're running a 20-gallon steel and you got 5 gallons to rerun, if you got about 2.5 gallons of product and you proof it down half to 80 or less, you got about, 4 or 5 gallons. You don't want to put that in a big 40 or 50, or 20 or 30. So it's nice to have a little smaller steel sometimes for those second runs. Yeah, absolutely. I just mentioned coffee cup because that's kind of what I've done. But yeah, anything, just keep it up off the bottom like that. That won't be affected by your temperature. Absolutely. Yeah, canning jar would be just fine. And actually, that's probably about the size of a pint jar. I've never looked at that, but I found a good old ceramic coffee mug. It works pretty well. But yeah, anything you can put in there, mason jar, whatever, just keep it kind of supported in the middle there, especially if you have a pretty heavy greenback. Oh yeah, I appreciate that, Steve. You on the ball, man. I appreciate that. I wonder when I got my last one. It took me a few minutes. Let's see if I can do it. I hate doing it too soon because it cuts me off, and I'm afraid it might count. Let me see where I left off. Okay, shut up. Let's see if they're gonna let me. Wait a minute, maybe it's there. It ain't. Okay. Yep, it let me. Good deal. Clint's going to come up and have to come and help me with this one of these days. I noticed when I was starting this that Dan Gray was doing a podcast, started about an hour ago on Farm to Bottle. Definitely, everybody should check that out. It's a great festival that probably one of the best. I think eventually it may be end up being one of the best ones we've got. It's a lot of fun up there. And Ohio is recreational for those that like smoking. So it's pretty laid back as far as that's concerned as well. We've never had any issues up there with the law or people or anything. It's it's always been good. A lot of people there, never any trouble. It's one of my favorites for sure, and I'm glad it's fairly close by because it's definitely one of the best ones. I think that's got them. Oh, I got one more. And that's got them. Yeah, I got a lot more shared initially this time around. Well, about 13, 14 before Facebook smacks me. Puts me in my place. Oh yeah, old coffee mug works great. Yeah, I use gypsum. I've actually got that in there. I couldn't find my calcium carbonate, but I've got gypsum as well. That and calcium carbonate both. I use not as much gypsum. I use quite a bit of calcium carbonate, but the gypsum I use a pinch of the gypsum as well. It's got some minerals in it, different minerals than the calcium carbonate will, and yeah, it does. You're right, brother. And both of them, you can get it at your brew supply stores. Yeah, it is. I agree. People can sell grains. You don't have somebody say, no, you can't sell grains here. I've never quite understood that in Maggie, why they wouldn't let people just bring grains and sell them. Of course they might be making moonshine with it, but they can take it home and make cornbread too. So what the hell's it to you? They just a little bit too much over there, and because they have the ALE too, that's very strict, and it's just, I like the festival. I have a lot of fun there, a lot of tradition going there, and I'll continue going there. But I don't feel as free there as there in the parking lot. It's kind of cool. Everybody kind of hangs out there. I enjoy that about as much as the festival itself. So I think we all could just go to somebody's farm and camp and have a good time, and it would be just as good or better. The music's good, and the people's really wonderful there, and I enjoyed going to the old folks home and we took them some games and a bingo set to play bingo with, and I enjoyed that part of it. And but yeah, the law enforcement there's kind of gotten more strict. Not the local. It's not the local. It's the state and federal level. The local sheriff and the people there, awesome. People there are wonderful. The sheriff's cool. As long as there's no trouble. As long as there's no trouble, they're kind of laid back. But the state boys they see it a little differently, and you can't blame them because it's alcohol law enforcement. It's their job. That's what they do. It's specific. That's all they're focused on. They're not out writing traffic tickets and speed traps and catching criminals. They're basically enforcing alcohol laws, and so that's their whole life revolves around that. So yeah, they're definitely tightening up every year. When ALE get more and more involved. And I know at the Winter Jam, uh, they were following a lot of people around and getting a lot of people getting pulled over, and they're watching for sure. So let me see here. Solomon Sutton, Popcorn Son. I was trying to couldn't think of his first name. Save me. Yeah, we're friends on Facebook. I can't believe I couldn't remember it. But he got. They were kind of watching him, and he didn't even drink a lot. He has a little bit sip from time to time, but yeah, they was watching everybody hard, and it's just. Let's see. I'll answer that question for just a minute. Yeah, Solomon's a good guy. It's good to meet him. I can answer that question in just 1 minute. If actually, I should have just gone back because they were talking about that just now. Yeah, let's see. Popcorn Sutton Jam is June 5th and 6th. So not this weekend, but next weekend is Popcorn Sutton. And then let me see. Farnder Bottle. I have to pull up there. 27th, but I want to be sure. I don't want to give out a wrong date on that. Um, let's see. Yeah. Saturday is August 27th, Thursday night. They're going to have a pre party. That would be the 27th, August 28th, Friday, and then August 29th, Saturday. And headlining will be Mary Cutter this year. So most of you probably familiar with her and her song that sent her to the top. I like her story writing. She's a songwriter and story writer at the same time, and some good tunes. Yeah, old Chris can find the best, man. Him and Willie. Yeah, it will. And the state boys, I don't care. Locally it will hurt them, and I hate that for them locally because there's some wonderful people there. The people that run the festival are nice, and I know a lot of the rules they have is just to try to keep it clean and try to keep the ALE involvement down, and they it's hard to do that once they get wind of some things going on. I remember a couple of years ago they came in and everybody that's got a moonshine studio, you have to drill a hole in it. And North Georgia's like, okay, I guess we're gonna wrap up, go home. I ain't drilling none of my they got $5,000 steels out there, and they're like, I don't think so. And so yeah, it got a little bit much, and then they really hadn't gotten a lot better. I know there was the cooler gate with Tom and Damon, and they just had some stuff in a cooler, and they came over and searched the cooler. I don't know that they can do that legally without probable cause, or I don't know if somebody said something or they just heard something or saw something, or but they just came over and grabbed the cooler and took it over and dumped it in the dumpster. I don't know. This seems pretty extreme. I don't know. Maybe they. Yeah, I got that message earlier. Good for him, man. Appreciate that, brother. Been nice if it'd been next weekend, so everybody could just kind of go to popcorn and then go over to there. They're not too far away. I know it's a little bit of a drive, but yeah, it's not too far from me, man. But I tell you, I'm getting so old, Richard. I can't hardly drive 2 or 3 hours. You know, that's about my max. I start. I doze off, man. I've fallen asleep at the wheel a couple of times, you know, and I don't know. Might have to start drinking coffee when I drive. Maybe that'll help me. I've never been a coffee drinker, but I might have to do something. But I don't know. I got a sleep thing going to. I guess in October. You know, they're like, I'm sorry that we can't schedule any sleep sooner. And I'm like, well, I'll try not to lose any sleep over it. And they thought that was real funny. But yeah, I got a sleep memory thing I got to go to. Sleep. October 20th. What day is it? Tuesday. Yeah. Okay, good. Yep. No, but I will. I have real bad sleep apnea. That's and worries. She's, you know, it's she. Yeah, it was somebody told on him. I'm sure. And I mean, it's bad, Richard. I think that it might have to do with my apnea. A lot of narcolepsy comes from, you know, from not getting enough sleep. I don't get good REM sleep, and I quit breathing while I'm sleeping, and it worries Ann to death. She says sometimes she'll wake up and I'm just laying there and I'm not breathing. She thinks I'm dead, and she'll elbow me, and I'll catch my breath and start breathing. So that might be some of the reason I'm getting some kind of memory issues as well, and some brain fog that I'm getting. You know, I hope that's the case, and I hope that it can be fixed with maybe some oxygen or CPAP. We'll just have to see. Yeah, I love that festival, man. Yeah, I love going down there, man. The people down there are good. It reminds me so much of people from back home. You know, it's to be that many states away, and for there to be so many similarities and in just the way of life and the way people are and the friendliness and reminds me a lot of Eastern Kentucky. Sure does. Yeah, and hopefully it'll clear some of my brain fog up because I'm having memory issues, man. Is that not long ago I was trying to come up with a funnel, and then maybe a few weeks after that, Buddy Butcher, one of the most common corns, red corns ever, and I was like, "There's Jimmy Red and I couldn't even think of Buddy Butcher, man. And it's just like, man, I don't know. What's up, Jay? Good to see you, man. Yeah, it's a long ride from you, isn't it? It's not too bad for me. It's like 4.5, 5 hours. You know, I might if I go. I don't know. I don't think Ann will be here. Yeah, she'll be back by then. But she don't have off, so if I go, it'll be, you know, I'll drive down and we'll hang out Saturday and come back that evening. You know, because she'll have to work Sunday. So she said she ain't gonna drive back like that though. She doesn't want to take off because she's taking off. She took off for Beattyville and she's taking off for her cruise. So I might not be able to make it. I do want to go to popcorn though. Yeah. We're getting bad, ain't we? Y'all making me feel better because you know I lost a sister to frontotemporal dementia, and it happened pretty quickly, and it started with her having to take notes like I've got all over my desk, and then being forgetful, and then it progressed pretty quickly, and that worries me to death because my dad, of course, he's in his 80s and getting a bit of dementia as well, and my papa had it as well on my dad's side, so got a little family history with it, and I worries me to death every time I can't think of something. It's like, oh Lord, here we go. This is the beginning of the slide. But part of getting old, man. Fighting that battle of time. Yeah, I'm definitely got to go. But that's October, so hopefully I can breathe well till then. And then I follow up with the memory care thing after that to try to do some studies on that in November. Like, damn, y'all busy. Maybe I should have gone into that. Yeah, it's definitely going to be something I'm going to have to do. It's concerning, especially when you can't remember the little things. And I know drinking doesn't help, but I do anyway. This peach. I got to save some of that Derek and Joe shine. I still ain't put a damn oak stave in there yet. It's gotten a little better over time. Got a little bit more sweetness to it than it. Well, different sweetness. Pretty good. Yeah, getting old sucks, man. You just gotta fight that battle. You catch yourself doing and saying things that when you were younger, it's like, it sounds like an old man talking. And then before you realize it's like, damn, I'm that old man talking, man. I'm the one that I used to talk about, not make fun of, but talk about when I was young, and say old man things and adult things. And now it's like, man, that's me now. Yeah, me and both, Clint. We're in the same boat, brother. My mom's side wasn't bad. My mom didn't have it, and my mom's mom and dad didn't have it. But on my dad's side, it's fairly prevalent. My uncle had it before he passed, and my dad's got it. And Papa had it, and my aunt, she didn't live old enough to see if she actually would have had it. She died from um, an allergic issue. She had to live in a tent for a long time. You've seen people having to live in tents. She was so bad, I couldn't even go see her because I smoked and just the odor off my body from my deodorant and the cigarettes and everything would just tear her up, and I couldn't even visit her because of it, But she lived in a tent for the last years of her life and couldn't really come into contact with anybody. I mean, you can see her, but not go inside the tent, hug her, or nothing like that. Yeah, it was real sad, tragic. Sounds good. Hypothetically, yeah, I have a friend that has some potato that's going to be need run soon. Yep, that's the hypotheticals. Hypothetically, yeah. Oh, it's a friend of mine. I have a friend that has potatoes that need to be run soon. They're working off well though. They're doing well. I think step feeding has definitely helped. At first, I could definitely smell the butyric acid at first. Well, about day 2 and 3, I could definitely smell the butyric acid, the vomit odor. Um, and a lot of people, when they smell it, oh no, it's ruined. Oh, what have I done? I've done something wrong. It's horrible. It stinks. It's ruined. It's just another organic acid. And actually, if you let those things take their course, you can actually get a pineapple flavor from a lot of the butyric type acids once they estrify. Did you? I have a friend that's putting one of those together, and I think he said he's going to do it right before he runs that potato shine that he's got fatty. So, but that's I don't know. I'll have to get back with him on that. Yeah, yeah. My setups look quite like a oil refinery. Looks like a gasoline refinery. Yeah, they do. Yep, yep. And old George, bunch of them. Then we got pretty good content here too. Imagine that, Clint. Someday somebody might say the same thing about us. And you know what? Go over and see old Santa on there. Pretty good content. What I like about I've never been much on doing videos and stuff and demonstration videos. Maybe if I lived in a state when everything was legal and up, I could. Um, I'm using just old diammonium phosphate DAP, little Fermax. Yeah, I've never really wanted to do the live videos and do video, right? Just videos and post videos and stuff. Um, there's a lot of people doing that, a lot of great ones out there. But I thought, there's not a lot of people doing Q&A. Nobody does a Q&A where you could just come on and ask questions and have somebody, answer, or if they couldn't, they could research right and do some, give you an, a good answer based on research, and finding the right answer for you. So apple mango a try, man. Will you tell that friend of yours be a pretty good thing, man. Hopefully they'll have that done. Hopefully that friend of yours will be at Farm to Bottle this year with a little sippy sip of that. So I just decided that, yeah, instructional videos be nice, and putting it on TikTok and if you're going viral or wanting to, make money at it, maybe, and I guess, doing the educational thing is really good too, and awesome. But I always just, wanted to do a Q&A where people could just ask because, um, a lot of people watch a lot of videos, and it's like, you can watch all these instructional videos, but you have to watch, like 6 8 hours of 5 or 6 videos to get the question that you have answered, or you may spend 10 12 hours watching videos and never really get the question that you wanted to ask answered, trying to wait for them to talk about it and they never actually touch on the subject. So I thought that yeah, I was thinking hopefully he will have a few. That would be nice. So I hope my friend will be able to come to Farm to Bottle and bring some of that vodka too. It'll probably be pretty good stuff. It's done pretty well. But just having somebody that could answer, and then so I started doing this. My buddy Clint got on there and helped me out because it it started out with a bang. There was a lot of people with a lot of questions, and I encourage more people that are watching. I know we still got a lot of people listening. If you do have any questions, I know we answer a lot of the same questions a lot. So a lot of times, people listening will get their questions asked and answered by somebody else. But so I started jumping on here, and I got bombarded with so many questions I couldn't keep up. And Clint, and Scott both jumped in there and helped out and helped answer some questions and stuff. And it really helped me out a lot, and it helped the show. And I appreciate the hell out of them. And I think it's something that was needed. A lot of people, a lot of the podcasts are about people and what they're doing, and that's great. I actually did some of those, with Roger and Mark, and really enjoyed it. Getting the master distillers on and talking to them and chatting and talking about what they had going on. This is a lot of fun, but I like this because this is a podcast for the people. This is my podcast, not Clint's. This is the viewers, and this is where they get a chance to ask their questions and talk about what they got going on, and I like it for that reason. Hell yeah, those ants won't hurt a thing. They do have an odor about them, man. I noticed my cat food bowl. Man, they'll be feeling it, and they have when they get in that bowl, and I can smell the fear pheromone that they put out when I have to clean them all out of that cat food bowl. It definitely has a distinct smell. I got pretty good nose, but yeah, it's a little protein, a little aardvark shine. Yeah, and it's something that was needed because you can watch hours and hours of videos and finally get your question answered. But here, man, you can ask it. We can talk about it, discuss it in depth, and I think that helps a lot of people. And basically in distilling, especially beginning, everybody has the same essential questions. And I know in the groups, a lot of the groups, that's been around for years, and there's a lot of newcomers coming in, and they'll ask a question that was asked last week, last month, last every month for the last 5 years, and some people can't handle answering it over and over and over again. They get frustrated and they start saying smart like things. Well, that's the stupidest question I ever heard, or I've wish I had a dollar for every time I heard that question. All kinds of comments like that, and it's like, don't even say anything. Just let them ask, man, because when you first came here, you had the same question, or when you first got started, no matter where it was, you had the same question, or you should have. So, and it's easy for people to get, frustrated answering the same thing over and over again, but I don't care. I'll repeat myself till I'm blue in the face if it helps somebody new. I think so too, and I'm not saying any podcast or anything in particular, but a lot of them are just about the people and it's great, highlighting, I loved having a lot of master distillers on and getting to meet them and talk to them, and, made some good friendships with a lot of them, most of them. And it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed that. And I wouldn't mind doing it again, but I definitely enjoyed doing the Q&A better, because I'm more of a help, there it was just for my own, it was about me and them, and it wasn't about helping anybody in the community. It's just highlighting the individuals and me being up there and meeting them and getting to know them and all that. So it's kind of a, me thing and them thing. But this is more of a, the rest of the people out there that aren't on the shows and that, want to learn and know. This is for them. This is their show. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, we got the shit show. It's just guys shooting the shit and having a good time. And a lot of times people jump on there and ask some questions too, and I'll try to answer them, and sometimes other people answer, but I just say tune in tomorrow night. People deal that with then, and always three or four people talking at the same time. It's fun. It's fun. But yeah, this podcast is for the people. It's for the education and for the individuals and for people that want to learn. And I know that a lot of the people, like I say, we probably get about 7-8% still pretty consistent with those numbers of live viewers versus actual views within a few days. So, we get a tremendous amount of people watching it later. And, Saturday night, I can understand why. Tuesday night, nobody can remember. And like, so a lot of people, I keep forgetting it's Tuesday night, or I'm always partying on Saturday, man. I'm sorry I miss you. But, I watch it at work at lunchtime or on the way to work. I listen to it. And, so that's cool. I enjoy it. Yeah, and that's probably what I'm smelling. Maybe it's definitely a pheromone, and that they produce in fear. And it's basically a warning to other ants, and it gets them all ready for battle. We used to fight ants, man. We grew up pretty bored as children, man. We used to get the red ants, the black ants, and mix them together and watch them fight. We were pretty bored as children. We also used to follow them around with little magnifying glasses and burn them. Pretty sadistic. It's just a little spice, man. It'd be good. Absolutely, brother. That's 100% why we're here. A lot of the seasoned guys, I mean, they might pop in and, ask a question, a little bit more advanced question and stuff like Earl did a few weeks ago. When, somebody more advanced asks, you got to kind of tighten up the bootstraps. But, yeah, it's most of the beginners have the same questions and need to learn the same fundamentals. So we try to cover those again and again and again, man. It never gets old. So I'll answer the same question a million times and smile, because I'm just helping that next person and 100 people that are listening, or 500 or so that are listening. But we get like I say, we get about 7 or 8% listening to it live, and then we'll have maybe 80, 70, 80, 100, and then by a week from now there'll be 1,500. So that's pretty decent. I'm happy with it. And again, I'll say it every time. For those that are listening, if you've had a question that you've got that you haven't had answered, or you got a specific question, make a fake YouTube. It doesn't have to be your real name. You could name your name Joe Schmo or whatever from Kokomo, and at YouTube, and create a YouTube and get you a fake email, Hotmail or whatever, and come in and ask your question. And a lot of people don't want to expose themselves. They're afraid of their name being seen. That's why a lot of times they'll just listen and learn and not actually chime in. So just make a anonymous name and jump in here and ask you questions and hang out and have a few shots with us and have a good time. That's what we love to hear, Greg. Definitely, brother. And I'm not gonna polish up my fingernails too much, but it's most people, when they do it their first time without any kind of guidance, their first 3 or 4 times is not successful. Mine wasn't at all. At all. It was scorched. It was horrible. So I know that for a lot of people, there's quite a bit of expense in getting into the hobby, and people get frustrated easily these days. There's enough stress from a lot of other things. That's one thing that they want this hobby to do, is kind of take them away from that stress. And when you have that kind of money spent in the first 3 or 4 times you run, it's not good, and you're not getting any kind of success, and it's just not working out, and you don't have anybody to ask and get some guidance from. A lot of people just get out of the hobby, like, fuck it, they put their still on marketplace, and next thing you know, they're just, going back to the liquor store for their stuff, but a lot of people do find the hobby, very good, and some may be just, good at just getting on and reading and learning, but having people explain things to you and break it down, definitely helps a lot. I'm kind of like that. I'm a hands-on kind of person, so I learn from doing, but also from instruction, and applying that instruction into what I'm doing reinforces it, and it really helps a lot. So we're definitely glad, man, and we love hearing about those success stories, man, and we want to hear more. So if you have any questions, if you run into any hiccups or bumps, that we'll be here, brother. But yeah, there's a lot of people that listen to it, and I'm glad they do, and I hope they enjoy it. And we'd love for you to get on here and drink a little shoddy shot with us, and tell us about your success stories. Mine first for horrible, Clint. That's fact. Yeah, that was humble Kenny. You too, brother. Thanks for sharing your success story, and we love to hear it, man. It definitely helps us, when we hear it. It helps me, it makes me feel better about what I'm doing, and it gives me drive to. 'Cause I know there's people out there that are getting some benefit and use from what we're preaching. It is, and it's even more when you taste them, and it's like, my God, I made that, and I think my family, when they drank my first wine, that I made, and they were very skeptical of it, and they're like, wow, that's actually pretty good. They're like, you made this? And that's from coming from my family. That's a big, that's a big pat on the back, because they're pretty critical, very critical. And if it wasn't good, they would definitely let you know. But yeah, my first runs were horrible. They scorched. They were just the worst. They were some of the worst I've ever drank. I scorched the shit out of it. I drank it anyway. We were pretty young. We was just happy to have some liquor. We didn't care what it tasted like. I do too. I have to admit, I've never made anything better than this Weller. That's some pretty good stuff. And there's some others, but I'm starting to age now and do some aging. Whereas in the past, I've always made just, white lining, moonshine, corn liquor, rums, brandies, things like that you drink right off the tap, that I didn't age. Never did a lot of aging in the past. But now I'm going to start, doing a little bit more aging, and so maybe in a year or two, I'll have something as good as that. Till then, I can always go to the store and pick some up. And I tell you, that's another thing good about going to Farm to Bottle in Ohio. They set the prices at the liquor store. The liquor stores are basically the retail. They set your pricing, so you can get that Weller pretty cheap up there. It's a good thing about it. That's about $40 bottle up there. Here it's even more in Kentucky. Yeah, I like it. That's my weakness, and I can't wait to get some of this stuff in a barrel. I can't wait to get done with all these rums. I can't believe I did a potato vodka before I started doing my grains this spring. But them damn potatoes were just so cheap. I couldn't help myself. There's like, damn, man, you're just giving me potatoes and saying make vodka, man. That's what I saw when I saw that flyer, and it's like 5 pounds for $1, and I'm like, they're just forcing me to make some damn vodka. They're just like, you know, yeah, 20 cents a pound, and you got to make, and they're good russets. We've been eating them too, man. They're good potatoes. So, and russets are a good potato to make a vodka with. They have a good starch content. Done a lot of taters in the past, but I always like mixing regular and sweet potatoes. I did a little combination that works out well too. And I did a little brown sugar with them in the past as well, which kind of gave it a different character. This time I just used a little bit of cane with them. Should have used more potatoes, man. But damn, I did 4.5 pounds to the gallon, and I guess we looked at the chart last week. It was like 8 or 9 if you wanted to get a full conversion. But I can't imagine how thick that'd be. And it'd been a huge cap. I mean, whew. Cap was big enough as it was like that far from spilling over in a big 30-gallon fermenter. I was kind of biting my nails there for a while. I was afraid that it's going to overflow. I appreciate that, brother. I do. Yep. Yeah, we still got drunk on that old scorch sign. It's a thin mash scorch. That's what mine was made from, Clint. An old pressure cooker. Yep. Mine was a 6. It's 32 quarts. So that's eight times 4. Yeah, that's 38. 8 gallon. Yeah, 32 quart. What's going on, Hillbilly? It's it's not just as much a warning. It's harder to do when you get a lot of back pressure. Anytime you have increased pressure, you increase the temperature, and anytime that it's harder, it's just harder to regulate your temperature. You're not going to probably, on a 10-gallon steel with a half inch, you're not going to get enough back pressure. It's going to explode or anything like that. So it's not um, an issue with being a fire hazard or a bomb or something or anything like that. But anytime you increase that pressure like that, it's much harder to regulate your temperatures. And when you get that temperature shooting up real fast and real high, it's harder to make cuts, right? So you don't have it, going from 190 to 194, 6, and it's harder, low and slow. When you go a little slower like that on your cuts on your final run, spirit run, um, it's a little better on cuts, making your cuts. But when you have that pressure, it increases the temperature, and it's really hard to make those cuts, and it's hard to regulate the temperature. So it works. It's yeah. If you got small pipes, you need to definitely slow it down and creep up. But once it gets to temp, it generally increases pretty quickly because of the back pressure. Oh yeah, yeah. We're definitely drinking it. Yeah, I appreciate you, brother. And that's true too. And I actually had that happen. When I on my pressure cooker still. I had to hide it. From my parents and stuff, and had mud daubers. Went up in there and made a nest. It's probably I don't know, it wasn't half. I don't think it's half inch, so it's probably 3/8 or something. It's small diameter stuff coming off that pressure cooker, and it probably dangerous too. But it was a pressure cooker, so it can handle the pressure. But yeah, it huffing and puffing and wasn't putting out. Man, we stopped it, and and ran a coat hanger up in there. And sure enough, it had, I tried to blow through it and couldn't, and it got clogged. And so sure enough, mud daubers had gotten up in that thing, and it'd been a while, and they'd been built a little nest up in there, and it was clogged up pretty badly. So that's definitely good to blow through your worm, before you get ready to run. Make sure you don't have any obstructions. And it's, when you run your steel, it's kind of like walking around the airplane or the 18 wheeler. When you get ready to run, you got to give it you all points of inspection, check everything before you go where you should. And you should do the same with your steel as it's running. Run your hand all the way around the seal. Make sure you don't feel any hot, steam coming out anywhere. You can take a little cosmetic mirror, kind of go around, look for it to fog up. If there's a leak, it'll fog that mirror up pretty quickly. That's a good way of indicating. And check everything out as you go. It's good to get in the practice of doing that. Yep. Yeah, you can, and you get a certain ratio. So, on these Vevers, 2 inch coming off that. Well, actually, the Vever has 2.5 going into that football, and then coming off that football into the. It steps down to probably a 1/2 inch. I think that corrugated stainless in that canister is probably a 1/2 inch. So, you're getting a little back pressure there, but everything's 2.5. So 2, coming off of steel, 15 off a keg, 2 inch is fine. 10-gallon steel, 3/4 to an inch. You're going to be okay. 5/8, it's okay. But you run 1/2 inch or less, like I was when I was young, it's probably going to be tougher to make your cuts. It's going to run at a little higher pressure, and everything kind of boils off together at the same time, and you don't get as much separation as you can when you go a little lower and slower. Yep. Or even if well, in a copper steel, or even if it's not, in just a stainless, if you want, you know, run every once in a while. If it's sat for a while, and you worry about gaskets hardening, you worry about some compression fittings not working as well anymore. Your gaskets, maybe getting nicks in them or something, or silicone getting kind of, nibbles out of them or something, or little, areas getting kind of cut out or somehow damaged. It's always good to run it and check it. Can't say that I do that, but in theory it'd be a great thing to do. And I'd say probably, first time, absolutely, and if it's sat for a long time, it's a good idea to do it as well. But if it don't let it sit around is the best way to keep that copper seasoned. Exactly. With an open setup, what's your gauge saying? About 3. You'll get about 3. 3 maybe up to 5, depending on if you're stepping down to go into your worm or something. So you're not going to really deal with a lot of back pressure. But once you introduce that thumper, you'll start dealing with pressure. Or if you have a pretty good size steel, 10, 15, 20 gallon, and you got 1/2 inch coming straight out of the cooker, you're probably going to be, running a little higher. But again, it's not so much the danger of an explosion. It's the inability to really control temperature well. What does your gauge show, Doug? 2.5. Yeah, 2.5, 3. That's perfectly typical. Yep. So what size pipe do you have coming off yours? What size steel and pipe do you have coming off of it? Just out of curiosity. Yeah, having that set pressure relief valve, 1 inch, good deal. Yeah, and if you had half, you'd probably be closer to 4 or 5. You'd get back pressure, and it's a little tougher to control. Right, right, and it'll add. That's another good point that you made, Clint. So as you go, your thumper is going to be slowly filling up, and as that level increases, so will the pressure, because the deeper that water that it's pushing through, um, yeah, you're going to get a little bit more back pressure. And I guess the guys on the TV show got kind of learned that the hard way when they did. Remember when they did that canopy of jar rigs? They had like 50 freaking, maybe more than 50, man. It was crazy. They had this canopy of jars all the way around. They must have 50, 60 jars at least. And what people don't understand is the first one adds the amount of pressure. The second one adds that much more, and it exponentially increases for every one you add. So a 3 jar rig is getting, not a whole lot of pressure explosive or anything like that, but you're getting more than you think. So it's not, doesn't increase like, okay, adding this added from 2.5 to 5. So it's 2.5 for every one. No, the first one adds 2.5. The second one will add 5. The third one adds 10, and it kind of increases exponentially. So when they created this canopy of all these jars on the show, it was funny as hell. It was a lot of back pressure, and it was dangerous. They quickly took it down and changed their design, but it was pretty funny. If I run close runs, I stream it out with backset. Oh, steaming it out with backset's fine. No, that's perfectly fine. That's exactly what you want too, man. And it's so much better that way. Just never forget to do it. A lot of people will, oh, I'm just going to pop the top, or I've got a pressure relief valve, or I've got a vacuum, assist thing in there that won't allow the vacuum or anything. Yeah, until that $5 part fails. And then all of a sudden you've got $1,000 copper steel, or $2,000 copper steel crumpled up like it can, So that little $4 valve you put on the top, and every time when you're done, the second you turn off the heat, open that valve first thing. Just get in the habit of doing that every time. It's like setting a parking brake, right? Um, Definitely. Yeah, it's perfectly fine running that too. Yeah, well, that's like we were talking. That's why you put that valve on top. And that's what I preach too. Always, if you get a cap or whatever, even copper, whatever, especially just on your cape going up or on your cap that's on there. Some people say, "Oh, I just loosened that," that tri clamp. Well, that tri clamp's like 190 degrees, so it's hot. So if you don't want to do that, you can get a clamp that's got like a rubber handle on it that's not too hot to touch with your skin, and you just open that thing up and not have to worry about all that getting a screwdriver in that tri clamp, or getting your grill gloves on so you can go in there and try to twist it off with them big fat grill gloves or welding gloves, whatever. So it's just a lot easier to open up that 3/4 inch valve or whatever. 'Cause that's all you have to do is just open it up so air can move, and it's fixed. It's the issues it's a non-issue after that. So yep, you did the right thing, brother. Sounds like you got a pretty good little setup. Yeah, I thought it was funny as hell when they did that on the show. I'm like, man, they have no idea the pressure they're getting. Is Jerry and them did that, and I'm like, man, they're getting building up a lot more pressure than they realize. And I think once they saw that thing steaming at the seams and blowing out the biscuit dough. They're like, wait a minute, I think we might need to make some changes here, man. Oh yeah, I think I remember that, man. Yeah, it's easy to do, and it's definitely just a simple $4, $5, $6 valve can save and that was a pretty good sized copper steel, man. That was probably a $3,000, $4,000 steel. It was a big copper setup. I remember that. But yeah, I remember Josh and his buddy. Can't remember what that guy's name was. He only was on there for one season. Big guy, blonde hair, that was with Josh. I can't remember what his name was. I hadn't seen him much around, but I guess Josh made us. No, he made a steal, and Josh dropped it. And I guess it's probably 18 ounce copper. It's a pretty good size steel. It's probably like a 40 or 50, but it wasn't real heavy. Wasn't the heavier gauge. And they dropped it, man. They hit a rock and just put a big old dent in it. Man, I thought they was going to go to blows, man. Boy, it was hot. Hell yeah. Speaking of which, I need another. God damn it, I can't. I like keeping that microphone up out of the way. I don't like it when people have a microphone right in front of their face and like they're going down on the microphone. I like to keep it up and out of the way. But yeah, it's shot time, boys and girls. Yeah, it's definitely gotten better. Still doesn't taste peachy, but it's pretty good. I'm not Phil. This is Phil. That's what Phil looks like. That's definitely not me. But I'm old Santa. But yeah, you can be careful. You know, they're really not designed for it. And these days you can get these cheap stainless setups that work really well. You know, and your wife won't get mad when she can't find her pressure cooker or canner. But yeah, that's what I started out on. But I wouldn't recommend it, Frank. It's there's some cheap steels. If you haven't looked around, I can show you some pictures of some that are available. You know now that are pretty cheap, and you can stay in good with the old lady, and she won't get mad at you for using her favorite pot and scorching it like I tend to do. But this one is called it's a bever, and they make them in different sizes, but they make a 3-pot bever, and I don't recommend those. But this is a simple bever football steel. So you can use this, and that works fine. And they go from anywhere from 100 to 250, depending on the size that you get. Maybe 125 to 250. You know, if you get a small one or a big one. I really haven't looked at the smaller ones, but they got a lot of different sizes. But I tell you something even is good or better is this right here, old beer keg, stainless steel beer keg, and you can get these. Phil Billy will have them, and a few others out there that'll have them that sell them in little columns that you can put on a beer keg and make you a good stainless beer keg steel. You can set that on a turkey fryer and make moonshine all day long, and it get more volume than what you would out of a pressure cooker. But I'm old Santa. Phil I run this on Phil's channel a lot. He's my brother, and he runs my brother from another mother, and he runs the militia, and we work together. As far as that goes, I mean, physically, I don't work with him, but yeah, a good old keg still. It's a good cheap way to start. You pick these up for about 35, $45 on marketplace, and then these columns will run you about 120 to a couple $100, depending on what what you get and what kind of options and stuff. So you'll have a couple of hundred invested in this or in one of these. This is 18 and a half. They're about 250, and this is about 15 and a half, and probably 45 plus 150. So you're going to have a couple hundred, couple 250. But sometimes you can find these Vever 18s for under 200, but right now they're about 230 to 50. I know Black Friday a couple of years ago, Home Depot had these $150. That was such a steal. I should have just bought several of them for people that wanted to get them later, and probably could have made 10, $20 pop on them and still give them a good deal. These are now about 230 to 250, depending on where you get it. And I think when you get done with the keg, it's about $50 once you get it and cleaned up, and 40, $50. And these again, these columns that you can put on them run you about 150 to 200, 120 to 200. So yeah, you're gonna have about 180 to 230, 40, about the same price. Big thing is when you take this column off there and you just got a beer keg sitting in the corner, it looks like a beer keg. You got that sitting in the corner, it looks like steel. But you can take this football off, and you can get it comes with a little shut off that you can clamp on top of that fitting that's on the top, and you can use it to ferment in as well. So, but both work quite well. A lot of people like the keg steel. It's definitely the way to go, and it holds a lot more than your pressure cooker's going to. And yeah, they're pretty good, and you can get it, on Phil Billy and Wayne, and heck, there's a bunch of guys that'll make stuff to fit on kegs. Everybody's making horse head caps, copper caps to go on the kegs, and there's all kinds of good stuff you can add it. That's one of the beauties of this tri-clamp system, is you can add it. You can make anything that you can solder that to, that weld that fitting ferrule to. It's so modular. You can make so many different. I'm gonna have to get some of my steel setups on here so I can show people, but yeah, it's modular. It's like Lincoln Logs, Legos, man. You can start, attaching stuff and putting inline infusers and all kinds of interesting combinations, man. It's an issue. But yeah, with the keg, the biggest issue with the keg is cleaning. And I ran a keg steel for a long time, and that was my biggest issue with it. And my only issue with it, other than you had to use a propane burner. Then now they've got the electric elements. You can have a 2-inch ferrule welded into the bottom side of it, and you can run an electric element off of it. Now, back then, it's pretty much you were pretty much run them on a turkey fryer with a banjo burner and propane, right? Because it doesn't have a flat bottom that you could put on a stove, but you could run them on a fire too. You could run them with a fire, which I've done, but my biggest issue was cleaning, so if you got a pressure washer, nowadays it's not as big an issue. They got these rotary heads that'll fit on your pressure washer that blow out the side, so you can just go in and out of it, and it'll clean the sides of the tank pretty well for you, and then you can just hit the bottom with a regular nozzle and clean it pretty well. Or you can get a 4-inch, 6-inch ferrule welded to the top of it, take off that 2 and weld a bigger one. That way you can get down in there with your arm and clean it out if you want to. But yeah, you can get started with this and modify the keg as you go, and save a little bit money, one piece at a time, man. Just start with that. And then next thing you know, you'll want to put a 4-inch ferrule on the top and have a little reducer going from 4 to 2. So you can put this, this little column right on top of it and take it off and have 4 inches. So I'd have to have about six. I can't get my arm in a 4 inch, but a 6 inch or something. So you can get down in there and scrub it. Pretty nice, man. And it's very low cost, and it's good. And you can put, like you see in this clear glass that's right on top of the keg. It's there so you can see if it's puking, right? So you can see if you got a lot of liquid puking up and foaming up, you filled it up too much, and you can cut her down and drain a little bit out of it, and then start her back up again. But also you can see inside there's got some copper mesh, and when you run through that copper mesh, it helps take some of these sulfurs that get created during the fermentation process out. That kind of gives your liquor an odd taste, a sulfury bad taste. So you can take those out, especially like in some brandies and stuff, and it helps the taste of it. But yeah, you can make good liquor with a keg still for sure. Methanol. Um, I need some advice on how much I need to worry about methanol from the head and tail. How do you know when the methanol cycle is done? Okay, they found that you will find bits of methanol throughout the whole run. So there's a myth, and let me show a graph. I have to show my graphs here. There's a myth, and a lot of people that profess to run shine and know all about moonshine and talk about moonshine and all this. And I'm going to take that out of the way and remind me to turn the comments back on. But this is a chart, and this shows the boiling point of methanol or ethanol, right? This is the boiling point of ethanol. We're not talking about, I'll get to methanol in this, but I want to get to this first. A lot of people think that you can boil a mash at 173.1 degrees, which is the boiling point of ethanol. And you can just boil off the ethanol. And methanol has a boiling point of 147 and change. And that, by the time you get to the 173, all your methanol has magically just boiled off. That would be true if it weren't for one chemical reality, and that's called azeotropes. And when you mix a mash and you have methanol, ethanol, isopropyls, and a host of other compounds in there along with water, you've created what's called an azeotrope. And an azeotrope means that the boiling point changes as other compounds that are also azeotrope are added. So when we do a mash, you can see this bottom row here talking about 10, 20, 40, 60, 80. That's percent. So half of that is the proof. So 100 proof alcohol would be 50 on this chart, right? Most of our mashes are like 8 to 12, maybe just a tad under 18. So everything that we do, unless you put a lot of tails in it or something, is going to start boiling in the 190s plus, right? It doesn't magically just boil off. Now, a high percentage of your heads and four shots, I'm sorry, will cook off early on. That cooking off early on will also allow some of them, because it's an azeotrope, will still remain bonded with the ethanol, but a fair portion of them will get boiled off early on. Meaning at 190 something, not 147, but it'll be the first thing that drips off your tap, right? So a lot of that is pitched, right? So, but you'll still get a little bit of methanol throughout the whole run. Think of it this way: when you drink wine, you're not distilling any of the methanol out at all. So you're getting methanol when you drink wine. You're getting methanol when you drink beers. It's just a lot lower. It's not concentrated. When we distill, we concentrate. So when you throw those four shots off, you're throwing a fairly decent concentration of those off. That's not something that you want to redistill. A lot of people will pitch, heads into an all faint jar, which is okay, but never those four shots. Those four shots are something that you should take off pitch and never use again. Grass killer, cleaner, whatever you want to use it for, but it should never be reintroduced. And really, to make enough methanol for it to be a big issue, you would almost have to intentionally concentrate that methanol to the point where you would have enough parts per million to where it would be an issue, right? So if you practice throwing those 4 shots off early, then you're not going to get enough methanol to create blindness, deafness, and kill you. But there is some content in there. It's just at such low percentages, it doesn't bother you. Also, the cure for methanol poisoning is drinking ethanol. And that, again, you drink the ethanol to have the methanol bond to it to get it out of your system. So, take that for what, that's actually the cure for methanol poisoning, is to introduce methanol so it bonds to it, because it's an azeotrope and it bonds, and it'll actually take it out of your system. But there has been, I think that there was this show back in the old days, the Reefer Madness show. I think also they did something to scare people away from distilling, talking about methanol poisoning. You're going to go blind. Don't drink that moonshine. You're going to go blind. It was sensationalism. Not saying it can't happen, though. It has happened recently, I guess, last 8 years. There was a place in India or Bangladesh or somewhere like that, that a distiller was basically redistilling 4 shots and heads and kept redistilling, and he literally concentrated the methanol. And some people in that village, died as a result. But you would really have to try to concentrate them to get them to that point. Now, if you were a large distiller and you had 1,000-gallon still, that first X amount that came out would probably be a really high percentage. Now, if you took that and put it in a small still and tried to get the alcohol out of it with that high percentage of methanol in there, then you would probably, if you ran it once or twice and tried to make cuts, and you would create something that would be definitely something that's toxic. But what we deal with, as long as you exercise safety and you don't rerun heads and 4 shots, and keep rerunning them and concentrating them, and you just pour them off and be done with them, then you're not going to have that kind of concern at all. There's literally no concern at all. You might get some heads in there, but most of your heads aren't 4 shots. It's not methanol. It's ethyl acetate, isopropyls, isoamyls. There's a whole host of compounds that you're going to get, but methanol is in a high percentage is not one of them. So you're not going to have any of a high percentage enough to where it's going to kill you or cause you blindness. Now, drinking alcohol is a toxin. We know that it's not good for our livers, but we drink it anyway. So, it's not saying that there's not a little bit in there in over 50 years of drinking that it's not going to have an impact, but it's not going to be any more so than the ethanol and the isopropyls, the isoamyls, and so many other compounds that are in there that we're getting. So, so it's not a concern. Just make sure that you pitch those off, and the heads might give you headaches if you make alcohol and you keep a lot of heads and you drink it right off the tap where it's headsy, and you don't allow those heads to estrify. Then you may have a hangover and headaches, right? It's like wine gives you a big old headache after you drink a lot of wine, a bad hangover. It's because you're drinking heads because they were never pitched. It's all still in the alcohol itself. So, but yeah, it should be a concern, and safety is always a good concern. And I like somebody smart enough to be concerned, and that's a good approach. Is always learn everything you can about it, and respect it and fear it, because there are certain things that you can do, create fire hazards if you haphazardly go into something. So as long as you approach things with diligence and wanting to learn and learning the dangers and the safety features and things that you need to do, like putting that ball valve on the top, so you don't implode your steel and create some problems that way. It's healthy. There's acetones, ethyl acetates, aldehydes. There's isoamyls. There's lots of higher alcohols and higher volatiles in there that are all part of the azeotrope. but that's not something that's going to kill you, right? It's going to affect the flavor. And if you age, some of those flavors actually turn into something good, but drinking it straight off the tap is a white lightning. It's not. So when you drink moonshine, you definitely want to drink just hearts, if you want a good flavored drink. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't save tails, because those tails have a lot of alcohol and oils in them, and you can easily separate the alcohol from those oils later, fusel oils, and it's pretty easy to separate and get good ethanol there. But for the four shots and heads, I always just pitch those. I never rerun the heads. But on the heads end, once you kind of get close to your hearts, if you're aging something, you can inch up a little bit and get some of the little heads and some of your low heads right next to your hearts and some of your high tails next to your hearts, and kind of use those to help create some fruity esters and stuff over time. But if you're not going to age it, you definitely want to just use hearts. And but yeah, the methanol, it's not a big issue if you just practice some safety and go low and slow and pitch those off initially, and you'll be fine. And that's good that you do have that concern, and I'm glad you asked. We should probably talk about that a little bit more, because we do really stress safety. That's one of the big reasons that we're here, is to keep it a good, safe hobby. And I know a lot of people have, they're kind of hear about a lot of these things, and they, I don't want to deal with that, man. I don't want to poison myself. I don't want to deal with that, methanol. I don't want to go blind and deaf. I've heard the stories, and it's, a lot of it's kind of like the reefer madness thing that is just kind of scaring people away. But it is good to have a healthy respect for it. Hello, Miss Tammy. Good to see you. Hope you're feeling well. Hope you had a good Memorial Day weekend, and I hope your hips are feeling better. Yeah, I guess we should probably talk about that a little bit more often for the people that are listening as well. I'm glad you jumped on and asked that. We should definitely probably talk about cuts a little bit more often, and the temperatures, and because a lot of people are under the misguise that they can leave that, and I've even seen it on the show, and they're teaching people the wrong way and a bad habit, by leaving the still open, and as you heat it up, that methanol will boil off at 147. It does not. I've opened my still up, I've measured the temperature, I watched it. It doesn't do shit. It's about 180 or 90. And that's just measuring the temperature at the top. And that's because down there at the bottom, you'll see it start to bubbling and stuff. And that's because that's right next to the heat, right? It's right next to the propane or the element from the stove. And that's where it's boiling and getting all the temperature. So the temperature down there right next to the bottom is going to be 190 some degrees. And it's actually starting to, distill down there, but the top's still 180. So you might get a little bit of, you know, smoke on the water, a little bit of fog, because you've got a hot liquid next to a cooler atmosphere, and you get a little bit of fog action. But really, until that bottom temperature gets to, 190, 94, our mash proof, where the actual alcohol will boil off on the chart. Because once you add water to it, see, this is the boiling point of ethanol. And, and this is with water. So as the proof decreases, the water content increases, as does the others, and the boiling point goes up. And as you get more and more alcohol, the boiling point decreases, because it becomes more towards the pure ethanol. But no mash is pure ethanol, and it's very dangerous. So you don't want to ever go above 40 on this scale, in which case, it's 182, 183. That, if you have some tails, or you're running something for a second time and you're proofing it down to 80 proof, which you should do, or less, definitely, then you're going to see things cook off at about 180 some degrees, because that's once you combine those two together, that's the temperature that this azeotrope at that proof will boil, right? So good chart to have. That's why it's really good to join us on Facebook at DIY Shine and Steel Building. Most all these charts will be there in the file section and on the Moonshine Militia. So you can jump in there and get all these and pull them down, keep them on your phone, and have them as a good reference. Most all the charts that I put on here will be on there, and I love having the charts, for that reason, because it helps explain things a lot better. What's going on, Dale? Hey, I hope y'all had a good Memorial Day weekend. Did y'all have a big cookout? I cooked some big old steaks. Finally, I guess it's the first time in 6-8 months there's a beef shortage out there right now, because I guess everybody's worried about cow farts and they're trying to get rid of all the cattle in the world. But um, shortage of cattle, and we had some. Finally, some steaks went on sale, and I got some porterhouses, and they were $10.99, which is a pretty good price. I've gotten them cheaper in the past, but for now, it's a pretty good price. And I got some big old thick ones, man, and we cooked them out. I've had those last 2 days, and then last couple days, and then today we had some of the leftovers, and had leftovers. I didn't. I ate all mine. They're about, I don't know, it's about a 36-ounce, 38-ounce porterhouse, inch and a half thick. Man, they were good. And got that and some T-bones as well. They had some that weren't porterhouses that I got for $9.99 for the T-bones. But I like them porterhouses. I like that tenderloin on them. Got me a good at Meyer. I got a good meat cutter. He'll cut them up for me, and he does good, man. But we had pepper steak and rice today with the leftover steak cut up on rice, and she makes, man, Ann can cook, man. She's like a chef. She is. I'm spoiled. That's why I'm so damn. I can't lose weight when I can eat so good. It's hard. But she's like a gourmet chef, man. She can cook. Her and my granny would have loved each other because they both proud in themselves in their cooking. And she really enjoys it, man. She'll be up there cooking and singing and happy. It's awesome. Oh man, it ain't at all, man. I love me some steak. That's the first time I won't pay 16, 18, 20 some dollars for them. Sorry, I'll just eat burger till they go back on sale, or eat some pork or some chicken. But they finally went on sale, so I got a bunch. I got a vacuum sealer too, so we got to vacuum seal a bunch of them, and that's the way we eat them. We'll eat steak for a night or two, and then all the leftovers will go to. Usually, a lot of times we have steak fajitas too. She'll heat them up, and we'll mix them with a little sauce and make some fajitas. And I love me some pepper steak and steak fajitas. They're awesome, man, especially when you make them with a good old porterhouse or T-bones. Actually, my favorite's a ribeye, but they ain't been on sale. I just hate when I buy a big T-bone and porterhouse. I hate paying for that bone weight. I'm cheap like that. I like them ribeyes, man. No bone. I'm not paying for all meat, no bone. And they're pretty well marbled too. I like that meat. A little fatty. Gives a lot of flavor. I guess my favorite is I don't know, I like tenderloins, but you got to cook them right. They're pretty dry. They don't have a lot of fat, but I love me a ribeye, well marbled ribeye. So that's what I did over the weekend. We had steak. Oh, that's awesome, man. Beans and taters, and tomorrow taters and beans, and then you know what you can do. You can mix them together and make some baters, potatoes, or some peas. I don't know. I like the sound of potatoes better than beans. Peas. But you gotta have beans and cornbread, man. You gotta have a little cornbread. Tell me you ain't got a little ground corn you can sacrifice for a pound of cornbread. Well, I'm glad everybody had a good time this weekend. I put myself in for the damn elk hunt here in Kentucky, and I didn't get drawn. They got a lotto every year, and again, I didn't get drawn. Man, I'd love that. Go out and kill me a big, huge elk. You talk about good meat and a bunch of it. Man, them things get big. Yeah, I was looking forward to that, man. I was eating that elk before my name ever got called. I was making room for it in the freezer, but not this year. But we got a pretty good elk population here in eastern Kentucky. Maybe I can go get one on my land down there and say, trespasser. It was a damn trespasser. I don't think they'd like that. Damn, that's a good deal. Hell yeah. Yeah, that's when I pull the trigger, 99 to $1.29, man. That's a good price. We get some pork chops sometimes for 99. It's kind of the odd cut. It's not it's kind of the ends that are kind of odd. And we can get them for 99. And then sometimes pork butts 99 to 129. That's a good deal. Good deal. That's definitely I pull the trigger and put some in the freezer price. Oh yeah. Yeah, a lot of that heirloom corn, and that Ohio blue and a lot of these heirloom corns, man, they make great cornmeal. Buddy Roger, he I guess a coon got into his storage area, and he had some Ohio blue, I think it was, and damn coon got into it and pissed on it and eating on it, and he's all mad. And I'm like, bro, he's talking about throwing it away, and I'm like, man, think about this: plant that, take it to the farmer near you, and have him plant it for you, and all that coon piss, if there's any on it, we'll just fertilize it and make it better. But work out a deal: you get half, he gets half, and that 50-pound bag can turn into a 500-pound bag. And he's like, yeah, you're right. So I'm glad he didn't throw it away, because you can plant that shit, grow it. Does it have them Carolina peppers in it? Well, those hot Carolinas. What is that Carolina pepper? It's so damn hot. What do you have? Carolina Reaper. That's what I was trying to think of. It got them Reapers in it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to probably too, Cave Daddy. I hate it, but I live in a city, and I got a groundhog, and I'm gonna have to dispatch too. And it's just because it's tunneling right next to my foundation in my house under my deck, and it's got 3 different spots where it's dug. And I'm getting ready to start growing, bringing in some tomato plants and some pepper plants and all this stuff. And as much as I hate it, it's gotta go. And you ain't gonna trap no groundhog. They're like a coyote or like a fox. They're pretty. You just look at them out the window and they run, man. They've got a pretty good sense about them. But yeah, I got some coons that I can't feed my cats. Every time I feed my cats, coons come eat it, and I'm damned if I'm gonna pay for no reefers. All right. Yeah, I'm not real big into the high Scoville Reaper and crazy peppers and stuff. When I was younger, probably, but no more. I don't mind jalapeno. Jalapeno is probably about my limits. I don't really get into the habanero, the ghost pepper, the reaper, and none of that. So it's, I guess, about a jalapeno. I grow those, and that's about my limit. I love a little bit of spice, but I like having them in my salsa. They add a little bit of tang, a little spice and bite to it. But uh, yeah, I don't like it crazy stuff and make your eyeballs sweat. Yep, it is. Color coded. I tell you what, some of my jalapenos get red, and I don't know if that it means they're getting hotter or whatever. But as they sit on the vine and after they turn green, and I probably should pick them green, they start turning red, man, and that's when I guess they're gonna start getting a little hot. But yeah, probably this week. I was going to plant earlier, but it started getting cold, and so I didn't call my guy because he's got a greenhouse. I'm like, I want him to keep them in there. We had some frost and stuff just a couple of weeks ago, right? A few weeks ago. So now it's time to put them out for me. So that's what I'm going to be doing this week and weekend. But yeah, I guess it's about that time. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Yeah, when they turn red with purple in it, look out. Yeah, when they get red, they start getting a little saucy. But I'm not letting them get purple. But they start getting like a little wood grain through them. It's just I don't know if that's maybe a vitamin deficiency or something, or maybe they just start doing that. But kind of get a little bit of a wood grain to it. Just like a vein running down it. If I let them go too long. Hell yeah. Dragon tongue beans. I don't know that I've had none of them. I'm trying to think what my half runners and greasy beans. But there was a certain type of bean my grandmother had. It was an heirloom variety, and she grew them every year, and she'd dry them and replant them every year for, I guess, probably she might have been her family's before that. But she kept them religiously, man, and I can't remember what they was. But it was like a greasy bean, It was I can't remember what the variety name was, but yeah, she loved them beans. My grandfather always kept a garden and a big garden, and both of my grandfathers did. In fact, kept big gardens. I guess that's what kept them alive, getting out there and working and keeping fit, working in them gardens till they was in their 90s. Both of them lived in their 90s. All my four of my grandparents lived into their 90s. Yeah, well, these were meaty too, kind of like a greasy bean, but I can't remember what the name of them was. I'll have to look it up too. I can't. It was a different heirloom variety that was kind of hard to find. But they also grew white half runners that they love. That they love them too. Lord, I don't know how many hours I sit around stringing beans. We all sit, get a newspaper and put it in your lap, and get a handful of beans, start stringing them, snapping them, and putting them in the pot. Many good days, man. Those are good times, good memories with my grandparents sitting talking about stuff, and kind of like what we do here, just sit and talk, gossip and talk, and stringing snap beans, man. Oh, wasn't a lima or butter. No, it was a regular green bean. It was kind of maybe a variety of it, like a greasy bean, but I can't remember what the actual name of it was. I'll have to do some research on it, but we don't have it anymore. unfortunately gotten lost. But it's good talking to everybody. And everybody have a great week, what's left of it. And we will see you all Saturday. What is that day? The 30th. Saturday the 30th. I'll be batching it. Ann will be gone. So I'll probably be eating out, eating McDonald's until she gets back. Or maybe Taco Bell or something. But until Saturday, everybody have a great week. We will see you then. Till then, shine on, peace out, and talk to you Saturday.